The Lexington. She is my most favorite carrier in World of Warships. She had the most memorable moments, and of course she also holds the title of the most damage I have ever done in one game. CV2, one of the finest looking carriers. She was one of the largest carriers ever been built, and she was converted from a battlecruiser hull into a carrier to comply with the treaty. Ever since the recent patches to changing the loadout of the USN carriers, I haven't really gotten the chance to play her until now because of school, and here are my thoughts about the new Lexington. In short, I don't like it at all, and I'm just going to criticize the crap out of this new loadout. As a matter of fact, I didn't like the Essex loadout. I felt pretty generous with the Essex video, but this time I'm not going to be generous about the Lexington loadout. So the Lexington loadout, if you play the stock Lexington loadout, which several people did because the Lexington is one of the carriers that a lot of people dislike, then this loadout will probably suit you well, because the best way to describe it, you're given a second chance with your dive bombers. It's basically the stock loadout with an extra dive bomber. Now, to me, what made the Lexington special is her strike capabilities and her air superiority. If you play air superiority Lexington or you enjoy strike Lexington, well, you don't have that anymore. And the best way to describe the Lexington situation is that she has everything. That was something that people wanted. She must have everything, because with the strike loadout, you don't have fighters to escort your bombers or protect your team. Air superiority, you don't have torpedo bombers, which are the most reliable source of damage compared to dive bombers. So you lack damage with air superiority. These are the two major cons that made the Lexington less appealing compared to the stock loadout, which is why people run the stock loadout. The problem with the stock loadout is that you're short by one squadron plane when it comes to upgrading the Lexington, of course, but that is no longer a problem because now you're given a second dive bomber squadron. But the bigger picture here, why I don't like this loadout, is that although she has everything, she can't do everything. And that is my biggest problem. You might have a single squadron of fighter compared to the strike loadout, which doesn't have a fighter squadron, of course, but this single squadron of fighter can be countered. I mean, all you have to do is follow the fighter. Once you spot that one single squadron fighter, once you spot it out in the middle, just send your bombers the other side of the map. And of course, you can definitely use a single squadron fighter if your team stacks aside. It makes it easier for you. That makes any carrier life easier, because they don't have to send their fighters flying across the map to help save a battleship that is by themselves, or a destroyer being harassed by the enemy carrier because the destroyer wants to get behind the enemy line and do things. So yeah, you now have a squad of fighter, but the reason why I enjoyed the Lexington all the way to its end with the strike loadout was because, unlike the Shokaku, the Lexington has a huge reserves of bombers. What used to be the reserve of the bombers has now been allocated to the fighter squadron. And this can be both left and right. You either like it or you don't like it. To me, like I said, I don't even like the loadout to begin with, so I personally prefer the extra squadron, especially, you know, in this stage of the game, when you have a bigger reserve of bombers, you can use them more efficiently, in the sense of constantly attack an enemy and don't have to worry about running out planes early on in the game, which with the Shokaku I have to constantly worry about. This is what made the Lexington so fun to play, because she was tier 8 and she had plenty of strike planes to hit ships, especially when she gets up tier. She can still become useful because she has such a huge reserve of strike planes. Now, since you have a fighter squadron, your strike package is smaller, and depending on how you want to view it, to me, I don't see the uniqueness of playing the Lexington anymore, if I put it that way. That was the biggest reason why I enjoyed doing the Lexington videos, is because she was unique in the way of how she was challenging people. I can do multiple tactics with the Lexington. One of the tactics I developed to overcome Shokakus is that I tend to send 2 dive bombers on the edge of the map to strike the Shokaku, while my torpedo bomber and dive bomber go strike an enemy ship that will pull the Shokaku's attention. It's constant thinking, and that's what made the Lexington special at that time. Now it's search for the enemy bombers and look for a ship that is out of position. And if you're asking me about the striking capabilities of this current loadout, this is the best game I can get with the Lexington, because I've been trying several games and it's just too frustrating. As a matter of fact, I think it has gotten to a point of this game where I don't see the purpose of playing mid-tier carriers unless you're grinding for the higher tier carriers, of course, but I really do like the mid-tier carriers. I like the Shokaku, I like the Hiryu, I like, these are the carriers I really like historically speaking, and that's what really motivates me to play these carriers. But unfortunately, for some reason, all my past games with the Shokaku I've been trying to record, and this Lexington video, I've been up tier and it's rough, it's very rough. Now in this game, this is the perfect situation. The enemy Enterprise isn't doing so well. I'm not sure what the Enterprise is doing, but she's definitely not that great of a carrier player. She's not really using her fighters as effective as you expect, and I think the carrier will get caught and killed. So this is like the perfect situation. Just because, now the other thing is, just because the carrier isn't doing so great doesn't always guarantee my victory with the Lexington, because now I gotta find the opening, and when you're working with only 3 squads of bombers, what can you do? So in this case, I got lucky that I found a Yamato by herself. As a matter of fact, I spot the Yamato way out of position, and I was expecting her to be by herself, and my predictions were correct. So as always, you slam people who make mistakes as a battleship, destroyer, or cruiser player, or even the enemy carrier in this case. So yeah, you might have a fighter, but you don't really have that much air control, especially when you're only working with 1 squadron, so you don't have much coverage over the area, and you're going to run out of ammo, of course, because you only got 1 squadron, so strafe wisely. Now, for my air superiority players out there, because I have seen some threads about air superiority being taken out, that was the other thing about the Lexington. That what made the Lexington so unique. It was her air superiority. Although I don't play air superiority Lexington, she has a very powerful air support. I learned the hard way because I played the Strike Lexington and the Shokaku, and I know although the Lexington air superiority doesn't do damage, she definitely do damage in the air, and there are players out there who likes to play air superiority. Now that is gone, you definitely don't have air superiority with 1 squad of fighter, and you trade it for 1 torpedo bomber. And yeah, you got 1 torpedo bomber, but this 1 torpedo bomber does not have that big of an effect compared to having 2 fighters in the sky against the enemy carrier. I can tell you right now, the enemy carrier will feel more pain when there's 2 squads of Corsairs than a torpedo bomber against any ship at the high tiers, because all they have to do is just turn on the 1 single torpedo bomber, right? That's what happens every time I play with a single squad of torpedo bombers in the high tiers. So here's another ship that is caught off guard. I mean, this game is the most perfect game, and this is the performance I can pull off. I want to get closer to the line, but one problem with the Lexington is that her concealment is awful, and once you're spotted and get caught, you're going to die pretty easily because she's a massive ship with a big citadel. So I'm going to go attack this Yamato. Let's talk about the AP bombs, because I'm sure people are going to ask me about it. Yes, if there was a game filled with bunch of vulnerable ships against AP, of course the AP is going to be very potent. That's the only way I can think of this being competitive, is going against a bunch of German Bismarcks or Tirpitz, or there's a Moskva, whatever the case is, any ship that is vulnerable, then of course you have a point. The damage is there. But I'm going against Yamato. I'm going against Montana's, Missouri's. Where does it pay off? And that's the problem. And there's destroyers, there's cruisers. It's too specific, and I don't see how AP bombs can make up for it. Unless, like I said, if I get into a game where there's a bunch of vulnerable ship, but in this case, I just don't see it at all. The only time I run AP bombs is on the Enterprise, because the Enterprise does not have 1,000 pound HE bombs. So I just feel disappointed about this loadout. The only people who are celebrating are people who run the balanced stock loadout before, because now you have one extra dive bomber, and if you wish, you have AP bombs now. This is my same feeling about the Essex. Like I said, I feel like I was too generous on the Essex opinion because I didn't put enough time with the Essex. But since I grinded to get the midway with the Essex a little bit before I fully purchased her, there's just not enough influence from this carrier, if I put it that way. You don't feel that influence. When you get into the game, you see a Kaga, you know that Kaga has 12 torpedoes. You feel that influence. When you see a Saipan, you feel that influence of her air superiority. When you see the Lexington before, she can either be full on strike, which is very deadly if the player knows what they're doing, or it can be a walk through a park if you're playing a carrier and you're going against a strike Lexington who has no clue what they're doing. Or you can have a rough time with air superiority Lexington. Now, I got in one game where I went against the Shokaku, and the short answer is that Shokaku will just destroy this Lexington. I don't know how else to beat the Shokaku at this point, because for some reason, my fighter squadron struggle against a single squad of Shokakus. I don't know, it might be pure RNG by chance, but when I lock onto the Shokaku, it's just not killing the Shokaku squads. And not just speaking about the air battles, but let's talk about the damage. Lexington is an American carrier. Bad concealment, you're gonna be hanging at the back of the map. Slow servicing time is nowhere near efficiency of the Shokaku. The one thing that the Lexington had over the Shokaku, like I said, was a huge reserves of dive bombers, and to use in the high tiers and doesn't run out these strike planes as fast as Shokaku. That advantage is now gone, and you're left with a beefed up version of a stock Lexington loadout. That is the best way I can describe the Lexington. And in general, ever since I started playing Shokaku and Lexington recently, trying to get a video out, I start to realize that it's I don't know what to say about the state of CVs with this point, because it's just rough. Very rough. I couldn't get a good game with my Shokaku or Lexington. I keep ending up in games where my entire fighter squadron gets wiped out by a Fletcher AA build. It's just rough. I mean, look at this. Here's my one and last kill. I think I only strike 3 ships. So at this point, if you're gonna make the Lexington worth, you have to make the right decision. Yeah, you can't have room for mistakes, because if I made one mistake in one of those 3 strikes, that means I'm missing a third of my total effort, right? It's just gone down the drain. So yeah, that is how I feel about carriers. At this point, you ask me, is it worth going down the American carrier line? And my best answer is that just like the Japanese battleships currently, because right now the Japanese battleships are underperforming compared to the Americans, the Germans, and the British, and soon the French are going to be out, so we're not sure about them. Usually newer tech trees tend to be stronger than the older tech trees. That's the usual trend. Just like the Japanese battleships, people are more thorough about getting the Yamato than playing each tier battleships up to the Yamato, unless you are a Japanese fanatic. And in this case, the only thing that I hear good about the American carriers is that Bogue was upgraded, but I haven't played the Bogue yet, but it doesn't really matter because I don't bother play the Bogue. And you're going for the midway. Same mentality. That is my thoughts on the Lexington. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you guys next time on my channel.